GHQ Kingston on your radio at 920 AM and 92.5 FM, and also online at mykcr.org.
We are Lions. We bring hope where it's needed, support causes that matter, change lives, change communities, change the world. Visit lionsclubs.org to learn more.
Introducing the YMCA. Sure, you know the Y for a swim or a game of hoops, but we're more than that. We're a cause. When you take a jump shot at the Y, someone else is getting job training. Practice yoga as a team practices her leadership skills. We give people of all ages, incomes, and backgrounds a chance to learn, grow, and thrive. So while you might think of the Y as the place for lifting weights, we're also about lifting entire communities. That's the Y. We're so much more. Visit ymca.net/more.
Hi, this is Winnie from the Rosendale Seniors, and I support Kingston Community Radio, and so should you.
This portion of Kingston Community Radio is brought to you by Ulster Savings Bank. Visit their newest branch, conveniently located at the Ulster Commons Plaza in Lake Katrine. Experience the difference that local community banking offers with the convenience of another great location, easy access, plenty of parking, and a 24-hour ATM. Ulster Savings Bank, invested in community, invested in you. Member FDIC.
Good morning, everyone, on this snowy, cold Kingston morning. Welcome to GHQ Community Radio. Mario, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, God. I'm sitting in your chair, if you haven't noticed. It's a big seat to fill. We got a number of items that we want to touch on to maybe spare some comment from our listeners who are probably out shoveling their sidewalks at this point. County Executive Ryan announced yesterday or Wednesday that he's seeking an increase in vaccinations from the state. This is kind of a two-edged sword, I think, Mario. He's hoping to vaccinate 50,000 residents within the next 2 or 3 months. I think if he had said the next 2 or 3 weeks, it would have been better received. 2 or 3 months, to wait for a shot, maybe 2 or 3 months. He hasn't gotten the okay or the extra vaccinations from Albany yet. This is just at this point just an ask. What's your take on this?
Well, we've been talking about this from day one. It appears, at least from the statistics, that Ulster County's been shorted. And we've been shorted from the beginning. We have approximately 1%, maybe a little bit more, of New York's population.
Yeah.
So if my calculation was we should have been getting probably 1% of the vaccine. And New York State was getting 300,000 doses of vaccine a week. We should have been getting 3,000. And we were getting like 500. We were getting 700. So we've been getting shorted, and it was very interesting. I don't know if you remember, but we did discuss this a few months ago. We were talking about the fact that Ryan kept blaming the Trump administration. Now the Trump administration is no longer there, and essentially he's out of Fall Guys. So, and then you also have a severely wounded governor. So all of a sudden, Cuomo becomes the boogeyman. And so, now we're demanding or asking or whatever he's doing, who knows. And it's supposed to be done, or at least he's suggesting that it be done as a joint project. Do it at Kingston High School. I was under the impression that we had already set up a clinic at Kingston High School.
Yeah, they're
we don't have any vaccine to distribute there.
Yeah.
So here's what I can say: if this was a business, the CEO, aka the governor, would have been fired a long time ago. This is a disaster. This rollout of vaccine. No one seems to know where it's going. There are pharmacies in Ulster County that have gotten the vaccine that the county exec apparently wasn't even aware of. The communication is awful, just awful. And, I mean, how can you trust these folks with your health care? I mean, God, they just can't seem to get the job done. And, I mean, this is not partisan. I'd be equally as angry about the lack of communication and execution, regardless of who the hell was the governor. I mean, this is just awful stuff, and they need to get it. They need to get it together. I mean,
you would think that the health department, Mario, hold that thought. You would think that the health departments of the various counties, states, and counties would be in charge of this, not the politicians.
You would, you know what? You would think. However, it all starts at the top, and we have Dr. Zucker, who, you know, he may be a great doctor, but he probably never should have been put in charge of making some of these decisions. Example, I think he was the brains behind sending all these folks back to nursing homes, the sick people. And now, to show how much we respect his abilities, we put him in charge of the distribution, which also seems to be, I mean, if you go online, the Greene County Health Department, I'm on their website too, they never seem to know when they're getting the vaccine, how much they're getting, where they're going to distribute it. They never seem to know anything because you don't get very much advance notice, I guess. It's just, all right,
it's coming tomorrow. Yeah.
And this is insane. And there's no excuse for that. They've been getting a pretty consistent amount from the federal government, and that should have been, maybe there was a variation. So maybe you modify from, we're going to give you 400 doses instead of 500 doses, but you should know that A, they're coming, B, where they're going to be delivered to, and things of that nature, because they've had to be refrigerated. They have to set up some sort of a distribution network based upon the fact that they're refrigerating the vaccines on the way to the various distribution locations. I was telling somebody the other day, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think Cuomo ever had a private sector job. He's been working in government forever. I doubt that this guy can get anything done other than to baloney his way into, making it sound like the job is getting done. But when you get into the weeds and you look at the background, you see the results. You can tell that this is somebody who really is more politician than
Mario, I don't think Zucker is the problem. You mentioned that these things start at the top. These things, I think, end at the top. That conference that Democrats had with the governor's secretary, Melissa DeRose, about 2 weeks DeRosa, about 2 weeks ago. A lot of that was recorded Much of it leaked out, although the usual backs and forths. But it's long been the culture of Albany, not just under this Cuomo, but particularly under this Cuomo, is that his department heads are answerable directly to him, and he calls the shots. And Zucker, not to defend Zucker, he should have resigned over this, the way this thing came out under his so-called leadership. But Cuomo calls the shots on this. The paradox of Cuomo, I think, is that while he's a control freak that I don't think I've seen in my career, and it's endemic to the profession, he takes full control but takes no responsibility. It's passed down the line.
Yeah.
Even unto his secretary announcing or briefing these Democratic legislators on "quote unquote" what really happened. So I think he has to bear the responsibility. Plain and simple. Zucker is just a means to an end. He's not in charge, in my view, and has not been in charge.
You know what? You're probably right. I hadn't thought of it from that perspective, but you're right. He probably doesn't give them much leash. Very, very tight reins. He sends his secretary to brief these guys. They ask some tough questions. She can't handle them. And this guy is knee-deep in alligators, if you ask me. Because, he's got a lot of explaining to do. And so far, it's so much easier. I mean, Andrew Cuomo likes to play offense, okay? Not really that good in defense. Loves to play offense. Boy, he's like an attack dog. He'll take you on. He'll attack, but now he's got to play defense, and his defensive coordinator seems to be taking a pass on this one because his defense has been awful. I mean, what did he say? He said something to the effect, "Well, they died, and they died. Oh yeah,
Who cares? That's the operative.
I mean,
Who cares?
I lost an uncle who was healthy. He was 94. He was a World War II veteran who was wounded at the Battle of the Bulge. He survived a heart attack, and this killed him because he goes into a nursing home, and you got infested with COVID. I mean, come on. And, you don't give it. Honestly, he could, sounded like he could give a crap about.
Speaking of that, Mario, and condolences on your uncle, but speaking of that aspect of this controversy, think about Zucker sending people into a nursing home without Cuomo's knowledge and or permission. Just it would be impossible.
Yeah, it's incomprehensible. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, incomprehensible.
So, I mean, the buck stops there. The buck stops with this guy, and so let me ask you a question, because you've been doing this politics for 50 years. Oops, I shouldn't say that because you don't look that old. Anyway,
thanks. Got a great face for radio, right?
Can this guy? Can he actually survive this disaster? What do you think? And let me just also say, Huey, that I am all ears. I would love to hear what some of the listening audience thinks about whether or not the infamous governor can survive this disaster. Our call-in number is 331-9255. Call in. Give us your opinions. We'd love to discuss this with some of these listeners, and I'm always interested in hearing somebody's perspective on this, because it's a complex situation.
Okay. Meanwhile, while we're waiting for those calls to flood in, on the county level, some interesting developments. The county executive and the county comptroller independently put out sales tax reports this week. And despite the sky is falling projections back in December, when we're all going to be broke and people are going to be laid off and services will be curtailed and woe is us and this pandemic and yada yada, they're either on the money or pretty close to the money. And I think raises the questions of credibility, which I've raised before on the city level. The same situation occurred in Kingston, where the real numbers as being received now, several months after the fact, which is the nature of sales tax receipts. The reports lag a few months behind the actual receipts. These guys, these folks, pretty much blew it back in December. Now, it's always been, you were a legislator, Mario. Sales tax projections have always been more of an art than a science, but it's developed into a fairly accurate science. There aren't a lot of big surprises. This is a huge surprise to the tunes of millions of dollars. And so I don't know if they're trying to make themselves look like, or these numbers make these guys look like, these people, I should say, because March Gallagher's in there. These financial managers look like financial whizzes in hindsight. My view was quite the opposite, which leads me to wonder just how accurate any of this stuff coming out of the county office building is these days. What's your take?
Well, it's kind of interesting. It appears in this morning's daily rag.
Come on, I used to work for that rag.
They it looks like they nudged Lynn Archer, who was the chairman of Ways and Means, out of her position as chair. She claims she has philosophical differences with the chairman of the legislature. Apparently, she also has philosophical differences with the minority leader of the legislature. And the bone of contention, she wouldn't issue any statement other than she was leaving, but why? But evidently, they're accusing her of attempting to micromanage the executive's spending plans, and I guess he would send them to the legislature, and she would maybe ask too many questions. I'm not exactly sure, because we couldn't seem to get any information out of the paper. I'm thinking that I would love to have her on, perhaps the next show, to tell us, give us her version of what went on, because this could be part of the problem. Like somebody's asking a question, and we're not answering questions. This isn't exactly the most transparent administration I've ever seen.
That's interesting too. This is a highly visible administration. It's Ryan is on television every single day, mostly about the virus updates and so forth. So there's a lot of FaceTime, but there, as you say, there's a question of transparency for the listener. Let's put it in perspective somewhat, Mario. Ways and Means is the most coveted committee in the legislature. Legislators would trade their firstborn to get on that committee, because that's where the money is, and everything, almost everything eventually flows through Ways and Means, and politics is about influence, and there's no other committee, maybe Highway, because all politics is being local, but Archer, from my understanding, was probably the best qualified Ways and Means chair in at least the last 20 years. Dan Alfonso was Ways and Means chairman. I think Phil Sinagra was, and of course Richard Gerantine, who retired last year for a very long period of time. Gerantine had business background. He's a housing developer, but Archer was a banker, and quite high ranking, and she knew finance. And if she asked questions, they weren't dumb questions. I would suggest, and I think this speaks to a conflict which can be healthy. There should be some tension between the executive and the legislature, unlike in the last administration, the Hine administration, where the executive pretty much ran the whole show. And if she's asking questions, that's her duty. But she seems to have her own Democrats against her. Donaldson isn't saying much, but he appointed her twice to that position, and by most accounts, she was quite effective. And I found her not so much controlling as rather open to suggestions and input. Now, as you say, there's probably a lot going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. But this is as county legislatures goes. I don't know, Mario. I don't recall any chairperson resigning from a chairmanship during a term. Do you? It's highly unusual.
No, and it's as far back as I can remember. Of course, I can barely remember what I ate for breakfast. But,
I know what you mean.
But no. I think there's a lot more to this story, and my guess is that they probably were getting some pressure from the exec's office. Okay, what the hell's going on here? You guys or she's blocking everything, and I was kind of surprised at Ronk's comments about she wasn't playing well in the sandbox with him. And it's a very interesting committee, by the way, because the legislature, the Democrats have the legislature by one vote.
Yeah.
Yet the committee consists of 4 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and 2 independents. So, and the independents
vote with the Democrats.
Generally, parity doesn't always, but he doesn't actually caucus with anybody. But
who doesn't caucus with anybody?
John Parody does not.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Okay, John's the everyman.
He maintains his, yeah.
Well, John's a Democrat. John's a Democrat. Born and raised, a former Democratic county chairman, former Democratic commissioner. I mean, the guy's a Democrat. To call him, if he doesn't caucus with anybody, that's his own choice. But he's going to vote. He's going to vote his own mind more often than not, which I respect in him and any legislator. But if you're trying to line up ducks, I'd put him in the D column. So what you have is Dave Donaldson appointing a Ways and Means committee that's Democrat.
Yeah. It's about probably 6-3 Democrat on a legislature that is controlled by one vote.
Yeah, 12-11.
Yeah, and so at the very least, it should be 5-4. They sneak a Parody in as the 4th Republican, even though he ran on the Republican line because he was rejected by the local Democratic Party out in his neck of the woods, and then still won anyway.
Well, lost to Edward.
Who knows? Yeah. I mean, who who knows what exactly is transpiring here. But Huge, I think it's a little ominous that this woman was essentially inclined to step down. By all measures, she's incredibly qualified. A former banker. Who else better to manage and ask the kind of questions people would ask of a financial proposal, and they didn't. I mean, why not just go and say, look, Lynn, can we just move these things along a little quicker? And exactly what was getting held up here.
Well, two things. At least one thing was held up, Mario. I think Archer is a conservative, to use a dirty word these days, in what is a progressive legislature and administration. She's kind of the odd person out. You'll recall, there's a lot of ideas on the table. This is a new administration with a fair amount of imagination, and we'll get to one of the newest idea coming out. But the idea of the county taking over some of those properties at the former IBM plant, taking them initially at auction, at foreclosure, I should say. Archer has challenged that, and that was last year. That she doesn't believe the county should be going in that direction. Essentially, the county being a landlord, being a developer, she's questioned that, and the latest Ryan initiative announced this week is I don't know if you saw this. It was a press release that came out. He's talking about something called a universal basic income program for $500 a month for a year, which is what, $6,000 for 100 eligible households that the county would support. Now that's fairly progressive. That the county is going to be, according to the press release, that the county is going to be giving money to people, poor people. They used to call that social services, welfare, that kind of support. Can you imagine how far that would have gotten in the legislature that you served in 20 years ago, 30 years ago?
Well, my initial take on that is it's just rewrapping a gift. Maybe I am not completely understanding precisely what this guy's talking about, but we have any number of social welfare programs. New York State spends more money on, as an example, Medicaid than any other state in the nation, even though we're only the fourth largest. And we spend more than California. And
there's twice as many people.
The population.
Yeah.
So it isn't like we're not a very generous group of people. So my thought on this was, there's been some discussion. I believe Andrew Yang, when he was running for president, brought up the universal, and so now that's like a new buzzword. And one thing I have to say about Executive Ryan is he has a nose for getting out ahead of the parade, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Maybe not always in keeping with what a lot of people might think, is good government, but he's got that nose, and he has really gone, what I would say, aggressively. He's aggressively pursued his liberal or whatever the progressive, his credentials, and that bodes well for his interest, perhaps, in higher office. I mean, he definitely doesn't need that to run Ulster County, and I mean, we've moved a bit to the left, but we haven't gone crazy to the left like some areas. And when you look at the elections, we elect a Republican senator in the southern end of the county. The legislature is 12 to 11 Democratic. This isn't, a real progressive community, in my opinion. But this guy he's out there embellishing those progressive credentials, and it really sounds good on paper. And I think it's actually being done. It's some sort of an experiment. I think Johns Hopkins, they have some group at Hopkins that's looking at the instituting these kinds of programs. Bunch of think tank, weirdos trying to figure out,
think tank weirdos. I like that.
How to give away more of our tax money. We just don't give away enough of it right now. So they want to figure out ways to do that, and God forbid they should ever come up with a program to actually teach people skills so that they could get jobs. That's why don't we just hand them the checks and keep them quiet?
I will say this for Pat Ryan.
Romans used to have a saying, about bread and circus, and give them a circus and give them bread, and they keep everybody quiet.
I will say this about Pat. He puts it out there. There's nothing sneaky about the man. He's a progressive Democrat, and if he comes up with something that pushes the envelope, let's throw it out there for discussion. It doesn't just burst on the scene suddenly at some future meeting of the legislature where they vote 12-11 for it. Let's talk a little bit.
Go ahead.
Let
me ask a question. All right, is there anybody awake in Kingston who wants to discuss either the wounded warrior governor, and we still threw out the question, does anybody think that this guy can survive? We want their opinions. 331-9255 is our number. Can we get some feedback here? Two old coots on the radio trying to figure this thing out. We need help, and we're not getting it this morning. So,
parenthetically, let's reminisce. At least I will. Years ago, when talk radio, 40 years ago or so, when talk radio was not only popular in Kingston but very competitive between GHQ and KNY. And they both had their Rush Limbaughs, so to speak. Jim Thompson was on GHQ, and of course Harry Thayer, and Jim Terrell was on KMY, and they competed for listeners. And there was one Friday night that Thompson was on, and he was on for an hour, from around 6 to 7, I think, on Friday nights. every Friday night, and he wasn't getting any calls. Now, this was during a period when people were really actively engaged in talk radio, and people would call in and fight with each other and bring up things that the host would never think of, which is fine too. And Thompson was getting zero calls. It was dead, and he was getting steadily upset about it, as only Thompson could. And he finally bellowed into the radio. He said, I'm not going to sit here for an hour on a Friday night, when I could be out, partying with my friends, if nobody's going to call. If you don't support this station, I'm not going to do it. And shortly afterwards, the phone lines lit up again. So, maybe it's the timing, Mario. I don't know if I'd be getting up at 7 in the morning either, other than to do this show. I'm never up at 7 in the morning except on.
Well, they got to be out shoveling snow or doing something, worthwhile at this hour. I used to listen on my way to work. I always drove to work, from about 7:15 to about 7:45. I always, problem is, people can't call in from cars these days. It's much more difficult, to drive and talk, and you can't hand hold your phone, and you got to have it Bluetooth connected, and I don't even know how to do that. So
you've got a car. You've got a car with all the bells and whistles, and you can't use any of them, right?
Well, they're for intelligent people.
Yeah.
For the younger generation, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing in a car.
Hey, Mario, on another subject, we were talking last night, just discussing some topics that we might bring up. You mentioned John Faso, and I saw that in the Post. John Faso surfacing after a long hiatus in the wilderness after he lost to Delgado 2 years ago, 2 years ago, 4 years. In 18.
It's about a little
2
over
years.
2 years.
Yeah, a little over 2 years.
Second term, yeah.
And he got some blowback on his criticism of the state reapportionment system that it's going on. I think you're more familiar with that subject.
Yeah, well, it was there was an article that he wrote for the
Wall Street Journal, wasn't it? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal. I happen to think very highly of that paper. I think it's one of the few newspapers that where you can get a fair shake. Both sides can get a fair shake there. They hated Trump. They don't think much of Biden. They're equal opportunity abusers. They're good at this, and they lean a little left, right, but they're not. They're not like a New York Times or a Washington Post where they're just, or Kingston Freeman where they're crazy, progressive Democrat. Anyway, so he writes this letter to the editor, and he points out something that was very, very interesting in my opinion. So, 2014, Ed Koch, the former mayor of New York, who, by the way, I got to meet and associate with and work with. I actually have a picture of me and Ed in my office. The very, very interesting guy, and he was also a good government guy. He really saw through a lot of the problems. So he put together a group, and they managed to pass a constitutional amendment in 2014 by a wide margin in New York State, 58 to 42%. So, the thing passed by 16%. And the amendment created a bipartisan reapportionment commission, and their first attempt at redistricting New York State, the Assembly, the Senate, and the congressional seats, is going to be this year, based upon the 2020 census. Because every 10 years after the census, we reapportion our districts. And this was to be their first attempt this year. So this commission was created by constitutional amendment by the people of the state of New York, and this was the year they were going to reapportion. Last year, very quietly, never to be seen in the local newspaper, not a word about this, both houses of the legislature passed a new constitutional amendment to be put to the ballot this year to eliminate one of the key provisions that Koch wanted in the original document, and that was participation by the minority party. So essentially, Koch's thought was, in order to have a bipartisan, in order for the commission to work in a bipartisan manner, the minority party had to have some influence over the outcome. So what he did, or what the amendment did, and it was approved by the people of the state of New York, at least one member of the 4 members who are appointed by the minority party to this commission, there are 10 of them, 4 by the majority, 4 by the minority, and then those pick 2 other commissioners who are non-enrolled. But at least one minority party member had to vote for the outcome. Okay? So you had to have 25% of the minority group agree with the outcome. I don't think that that's an insurmountable hurdle, or it should be considered a threat. However, both the Senate and the Assembly passed an amendment saying and removing that provision. So now what it did was it essentially made it a majority decision. And the reason it makes it a majority decision is the full legislature gets to vote on the recommendations. So at this point, you're never going to get it through the full legislature unless it favors, or the majority parties have the final say on what it looks like. So you're going to have to bend your knee to the majority party, because you can't get a document to them that has any approval by the minority party. So what it does is it essentially reinforces the 3 people in a room mentality of New York government. It not only does it reduce the minority party even further, it promotes the worst aspect of New York State government. Now, to their credit, the League of Women Voters and the Citizens Union, which are the two biggest voting rights organizations in the state, both came out adamantly opposed to this amendment. All right? Adamantly opposed. Think it's terrible. It was voted on again in January, very quietly. We had the COVID epidemic. We had all kinds of things going on. But these folks managed to vote again on January 20th and 21st. Now, what's interesting, I'll just focus on one group, but what's interesting was the vote in the Senate was straight party line. All 42 Democratic senators voted for it. And what's crazy, well, first off, they have no choice, okay? Because Andrea Stewart-Cousins wants to decide the lines. And why is that important to Andrea Stewart-Cousins? Well, what's important about it is as soon as she can draw your lines, she can draw you right out of your Senate district if you don't, stand at attention when she walks down the aisle and you don't genuflect when she tells you to genuflect. You're gone. You're gone. So not only does she cut your staff, she cuts you right out of your position, and so by voting unanimously, this is what's so insane that it just keeps perpetuating this three people in a room giving all the power to three people in New York State to run this state. It is so sad. It is beyond my comprehension how these folks have no backbone. Now, granted, if they voted against this amendment, they would be, they'd lose half of their staff. They'd be given a legislative office in the basement, because she has she has that much power. Now, what's interesting is in the assembly, 9 Democrats crossed over and said, no, this is not good government. Now, it's not a lot. There's over 100 assemblymen, Democratic assemblymen, but 10% of them said, no, we're not going for this. So I haven't been able to find out which ones voted for it. Perhaps we can get our esteemed assemblyman on, and he can explain to us why this constitutes good government. I think it should be an interesting discussion. At least he's willing to come on. Senator Hinchey, who voted for this, we haven't been able to get her on the show at all, and I think we should invite her to discuss this. And I think we should maybe even invite somebody from the League of Women Voters to explain to us what their main issue is with doing this. Now, it will go on the ballot again, and the people of New York just have to stand strong and say, no, we're not voting for bad government. We're just not going to vote for it. Because look at this one-party system. I mean, it's one damn corrupt disaster after the other. I just don't get it. I mean, we've got to have one of the worst state governments in the country. I'm sorry.
I don't know, Mario. I think if we moved to Michigan or someplace, we'd probably find it similar. One of the things that strikes me over the long view is that one of the arguments against, this is germane to this subject, one of the arguments, if not the leading argument against term limits, is that there's already term limits, in that there is a tremendous turnover in the state legislature, particularly in the last 15 or 20 years. The lifelong legislators are more the exception, much more the exception now. But what strikes me as strange is that even with all these new legislators coming in, say Senator Hinchey as an example, nothing seems to change. You get all these new faces, and the system is in place. It's what they're called systemic, I think. It is the system, and that's how it works. And apparently, new legislators are advised of that if they didn't know it already when they come in. You just described the power dynamic of how leadership controls the rank and file. In this case, through reapportionment or office space or appropriations, there's a lot of strings they can pull that they're given by their members. So that's kind of discouraging, quite frankly. You get bright young people like Hinchy. She's a young woman in her early 30s. You would think that these are the kinds of people. Also. Yeah, these are the kinds of people we want to send up there, and that they will change things, improve things. That hasn't happened, and I don't know. It's kind of sad, really, and all the systemic, as you said, the corruption and the politics and the dictatorships of leadership remain in place. The faces change, but the systems don't.
Yeah, it's I don't know if you recall, but I was the chairman of a rather formidable political action committee.
Yeah.
Back in the 70s and 80s, and we virtually did not bother to have much conversation with individual legislators. We dealt almost exclusively with the leadership. If there was something that was coming down the pike, some poor legislator from Manhattan might introduce a bill, and that we found to be, something that we couldn't support, we would call the legislator. They would say to us, my constituents want this. I have, okay, fine. Make a phone call to the majority leader's office. Bingo, the bill dies. That's it. That's how it happens. And if I didn't see it with my own two eyes, I wouldn't ever believe it. And it was as simple as that. And my guess is nothing's changed. And I don't think they rewrote the playbook. And the reason I don't think they rewrote the playbook is because it's still the same old deal. The three leaders get together behind closed doors and they hammer out a budget. They put things through the budget that should be legislated, but they just put them in the budget, and once the budget passed, they become a law. And these three people now run New York State. And we've got all these legislators, and they all campaign, and the Republicans tell you how they're gonna change things, and they're gonna keep feet to the fire. They get up there and they can't do anything. I'll give you a prime example. Okay, check the difference between Senator Hinchy's allocation for staffing and Senator Martucci's allocation for staffing. Somehow, the Senate thinks that if your senator is a Democrat, they're entitled. Those people are entitled to more constituent services than if your senator is a Republican. Essentially, completely disenfranchising minority vote, the people who sent a minority legislator up there. Same thing happens in the assembly. My brother-in-law won his seat.
John Guerin.
His office was John Guerin. His office was about a third size of what Kevin Cahill had previously. He had one or one and a half staff members. I mean, come on. Give me a
Well,
break.
Mario, this
All
this just confirms over a long period of time what we're saying. When Art Gray was elected to the Senate in 1980 or 88, excuse me, which is quite a while ago, the guy that he defeated, Richard Schermerhorn, said Art Gray was a Democrat, Schermerhorn a Republican.
Yeah.
He said he won't get a teaspoon of blacktop. It was one of the great lines. And he didn't. He didn't even get in office until for almost a year. And of course, he was ineffective. He couldn't even serve his constituents. That's the nature of it, which I think goes back to the reapportionment. When you have the power, you are the power, and they will exercise it. Maybe it's human nature. The late Arthur Wicks used to say the majority rules, period. When you got the votes, and I would think with these supermajorities that are in both houses of the legislature, they're not going to give that up, give up any of that power and influence willingly. The only way I can't say the only way to change things is to elect new people, because it doesn't. And speaking of cousins marching down the aisle, I used to watch Jerry Benjamin's daughter religiously when she had her program on.
Yeah, she was terrific.
Yeah, she was really.
Liz Benjamin.
She's not doing that anymore, but she and cousins were practically joined at the hip. She would have cousins on at least once a week to discuss the minority when she was in the minority. Majority leader Cousins, and Cousins would rail against, at that time, 3 men in a room, that whole system of government that you just described. And she would rail about it. Well, damn it, she's there now, and she's in the room. She hasn't been on. She steps out to make statements, but she has no problem with being in the room.
Yeah,
anyway, Mario, we got a couple of minutes before we go to break. The number, folks, if you finally got up, is 331-9255. We'd like to hear from you, and we got a birthday coming up, and we got 90 seconds, Mario. If you want to wrap up this segment, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is in a bipartisan manner. Both sides did this when they had control, and who suffered but the people of the state of New York. We continue to suffer, and to be honest with you, we were one of the few states that lost population. People just cannot do it anymore. They're leaving New York State, and I'm going to tell you something. You're going to see a tremendous dynamic, because we are now almost at a significant portion of our population can work from home, and they're going to work from home from Tennessee and from North Carolina and places where there are no taxes. And New York State, in my opinion, is going to take a massive hit on income, because if you can work from home, why the hell is your home in New York?
Well, as a matter of fact, you're working from home, aren't you, Mario? You're down
second
Florida.
Listen, I have one of my kids becoming a Florida resident because he can work from home.
Okay.
Good. Well, on that note, we'll go take a break. Mario, you sit tight. We'll be back with you in a minute, and we're going to take a break.
You're listening to Kingston Community Radio on WGHQ Kingston. On your radio at 920 AM and 92.5 FM, and also online at mykcr.org.
Think fast. In the short time it takes to listen to this message, a small flame can turn into a big fire. Several minutes more, and thick, poisonous smoke may have filled your lungs and reduced your ability to respond. Give it 5, and your entire home may be filled with flames.
Keep breathing. We got you.
Don't let your world go up in smoke. Have working smoke alarms and practice an escape plan for you and your loved ones. Learn more at usfa.fema.gov, because fire is everyone's fight.
At St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, we're fighting against childhood cancer every day. At the heart of this battle are our donors.
Most of us want to make some type of difference in the lives of others. St. Jude does miraculous work.
The fact that no one has to pay, it's a place where everyone is treated as an equal.
Everybody is welcome here, and it doesn't matter your religion or what part of the world you're from. All that is taken away. It just gives you some hope.
It's just a nice feeling to put your energy into something that really does genuinely make a difference in a child's life.
There's just no greater gift. If we have the ability to help, then we have a responsibility to help.
Finding cures, saving children. St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Find out how you can help at stjude.org.
Have you ever experienced a wish come true? For a child battling a critical illness, a wish come true can be a turning point. One song, one dance, one game, one adventure, one moment changes everything. Make-A-Wish needs your support to grant the wish of every eligible child. Visit wish.org now to help grant more life-changing wishes. Together, we can transform lives, one wish at a time.
Hi, this is Tony Marmo from Norman Staffing, and we've been bringing together employers and job seekers since 1980. If you're an employer and have job vacancies, let Norman Staffing help fill them with permanent or temporary workers. We screen, interview, and recommend the best candidates for your company. We make the employment process easier and faster for you. Please call Norman Staffing for your employment needs at 338-9111, 338-9111, or normanstaffing.com.
Hi, this is Jim Quigley, supervisor of the town of Ulster, and I support Kingston Community Radio, and so should you.
This programming is brought to you by the Friends of Kevin Cahill. As a strong advocate of local broadcasting, Assemblymember Cahill urges you to support Kingston Community Radio with your time and donations. Your contributions keep KCR vital and on the air at FM 92.5, AM 920, and on the web at mykcr.org. Please join Assemblymember Cahill and send your gifts of $10, $25, or more to Kingston Community Radio, Post Office Box 4364, Kingston, New York 12402. Together, let's keep KCR alive.
And we're back with birthdays. Mario, this is normally your job, but I'll fill in for you. Happy birthday to T.J. Sager.
Which day is it? Is it Friday or some of them?
February 20th is his birthday.
All right, so that's tomorrow. So we got
Tomorrow.
no birthdays for today.
Yep, no birthdays today, but we got Mr. Sager on February 20th from his family. And since he is the only birthday tomorrow, over the weekend, happy birthday, and you pick up your the infamous
the infamous cow pie at 62 O'Neill Street in Midtown Kingston.
Yep.
Is that there's no Sunday birthday either?
Nope. And I would like to wish a happy birthday to my son, David Remi Reynolds, who will get no pie because his
well,
father.
Next year he will.
Next year he may get a pie next year. Yeah, if his father would remember to send it in earlier. Anyway, back to the show. We're at 331-9255. Mario, speak to me. Mario, are you there?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Hey, I want to tell a story. Some people like to hear my stories, and this has to do with GHQ, actually, and I don't know how many people remember this one. It's quite a while. When Harry Thayer was here doing his editorials of the year, and it's amazing, Harry's been gone. How many years now has Harry
He died in 1980.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're looking at 40 years of Harry.
I was 8 years old when he died.
Yeah. Yes. And anyway, Harry's brother, Walter, was a very influential man. He was a lawyer. He was a consultant. He was associated with the newspaper, the
Herald Tribune.
Herald Tribune, and Anyway, he set Harry up with an exclusive interview with John Kennedy. Kennedy was barnstorming around the state of New York in his plane, the Caroline. And they used to have photographs in the studios here at GHQ of Harry interviewing John Kennedy in the 1960 presidential
I have
election.
one in my mother's office with him and his younger brother that was the attorney general, right?
Yeah, Bobby.
Yes, I have one of him with him and Bobby.
Do you have Harry in it?
I have a picture of JFK that looks like Harry's holding up. Remember?
Yeah, that's a picture.
Yeah, that's the one. He's holding up that. Remember,
Yeah.
he used to drive around in that station wagon.
Yeah.
And he had that long
on the steps of the Caroline, and it was just a whistle stop. Kennedy just touched down at Ellenville Airport. Harry was waiting for him. The problem that Harry had was that he wasn't very familiar with his own equipment. A reel-to-reel tape recorder was something that Harry didn't know much about. So anyway, Harry does this interview with Kennedy, and it runs for about 20 minutes. And about the last 15 minutes, Kennedy's looking at his watch because he's got to be someplace else in 10 minutes ago. And so Kennedy, they finished the interview, and Kennedy says offhandedly to him, "Hey, would you mind playing that back? I'd like to hear what I just said. I might want to clarify something." And Harry looked down to his horror at the reel, and it had been on playback the whole time. And so he said to Kennedy, "Gee, I'm really sorry, Senator. Could we do it again?" And Kennedy says, literally, "Forget about it." He got back on the plane, flew away.
That's a funny story. Yeah, that's crazy.
It's a classic. We were talking about reapportionment, which is I don't think in the top 10 of anybody's list of priorities, but it has profound consequences. Mario, I'm referring to on the local level, on reapportioning Ulster County, the Ulster County Legislature. The towns, of course, don't get reapportioned, but the city does, the city of Kingston, and they should be appointing a reapportionment committee at some point very soon. Because they'll be getting the numbers, I think, in the spring, the census numbers. The county does it kind of like the state, like you were talking about before, like the state does it, in that they have this independent commission that draws up the lines, and the county has been commended around the state, although rarely copied, around the state for its democratic, even-handed, nonpartisan method of reapportionment, and the committee was named. I believe there's seven people on this committee representing both parties and the independent voters, who are a third of the electorate in Ulster County and should be represented. They'll begin their work. If they've had a few meetings, or organizational meetings, to draw these lines. You mentioned before, Mario, that Ulster County is projected to lose about 3,000 people, mostly, as I understand it, in the northern end of the county and the city. The southern end of the county continues to grow, however, modestly. I think spillover from Orange County, which is growing rapidly, and so the lines will be different. And maybe the legislature itself will be different in terms of numbers. There's 23 legislators. I know you like to talk about this number in relation to how it affects vetoes when they're cast. Apparently, if they do change the number of legislators, it has to be done by referendum. So there could be a lot of activity in the next few months in that area. What's your take on it, Kat?
Well, the first thing was the. I want to compliment the previous reapportionment committee. I was the county Republican chairman when that was taking place, and the only thing that I asked the Republicans try and do on that commission was to, wherever possible, to try and keep the towns whole. I just didn't like the thought of towns being split up if it wasn't necessary, because the legislative districts, there's a margin of error on those legislative districts. They can be as small as this and as large as that. They have to fit into.
It's about 10% of mean, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that. So, I just felt that the way the county's organized, we have 20 towns, we have the city. Let's try and keep the districts, pretty much within the localities where people gravitate, where you have a town board, you have a town supervisor, and they can work with their local legislator, because one legislator represents that town. I mean, you can't do it in every situation. Like, for instance, Saugerties, there's a little piece of Saugerties that is in a district with some of the town of Ulster, that kind of stuff. But by and large, the town of Ulster, where I live, was kept pretty much intact. And there was one district created with part of Saugerties, part of Ulster, but where geographically there was some commonality, So I think they did a great job, and that's one of the reasons, by the way, that I attribute the fact that we don't have a one-sided legislator. That we have, virtually every legislative race has been creating a legislature where, it was 12 to 11, 13 to 10, those kinds of results. And I think as a result of that, we get a better government. And I'm hoping that they'll do that and be fair this year and give us, good legislative districts with focuses on maintaining some of the traditional town relationships. So if they do that, I'm going to be very, very happy. Now, the other thing I was going to mention, I forgot to mention this earlier when we were talking about the state debacle, was the fact that it was reported now it wasn't reported in the Freeman. For some reason, this wasn't an article that they felt, required anybody here to know about. But a number of other newspapers around New York State also reported the fact that not only is the legislature openly demonstrating their disdain for this commission, they didn't fund it. So in the 2019-2020 budget, they allocated $250,000 for the commission. In the 2020-21 budget, which ends this March, they allocated $750,000. They need about $5 million to do this reapportionment. They've been allocated $1 million, and they haven't received the money yet. Now think about this. They haven't received the money from last year's budget, let alone this year's budget. The two executive directors that are working side by side to begin the process, it was reported, have been working without pay since last summer. Are they sending a message? And when the commission, that when the heads of the commission, because they have everything is bipartisan, so there are two heads. When they ask about it, they are given the Albany runaround. Now, well, it's, we're going to check with the budget people. We're going to check with this. We'll get back to you. They were quoted as saying, now remember, one of these is a Democrat, one's a Republican. So, all right, the two heads. They were quoted as saying in the newspaper that nobody's gotten back to them. They keep asking for the money. No one's gotten back to them. So the second part of this is, well, folks, even if you don't pass our amendment this year, we're not funding these guys. We're not giving them any money. Let's see them do a reapportionment. So the game plan, according to some of the editorials I've read, is the legislature will then hand them the reapportionment and say, okay, look, we know you don't have any staff. We know we didn't give you the IT capabilities to do this. This is what we think is fair. Once you guys take a look at it, if you want to dress it up a little bit, fine, and then send it back to us and we'll pass it. And that's the whole game plan. See, you can create as many agencies as you want. If you don't fund them, you essentially stifle them. And what's interesting is Cuomo didn't put any money in his budget either, because the governor traditionally gets to draw the congressional races. He gets to draw the congressional seats, and each house gets to draw their own seats. So he's not interested in giving that up either, even though the people of New York clearly said, I mean, you want to talk about rubbing our noses in it. We passed a constitutional amendment. These people are elected, and they swear to uphold the Constitution of the state of New York and the United States of America, and then turn around and thumb their noses at you. I have never seen anything.
Mario, we got a phone.
blatant
Mario,
like this.
we got a phone call. Can you hold that, please?
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Hey, good morning. It's Brian Waltman calling in. Happy Snow
Hey, Brian.
Friday. How you guys doing?
Fine, thanks.
It's interesting. I'm sorry, but I had a chance to look at the county executive State of the County message the other day. I don't know if you gentlemen have spoken about it yet, but first of all, it was very well produced. It's very professionally done, and I wonder how much that cost. But it's interesting to me that the only specific economic development policy or program that the executive referred to was the so-called Hunger Games competition, where 100 families are going to get $500 a month. I find Ulster County's economy appears to be collapsing all around us. I think it's very disappointing that that's the only specific proposal that the county executive made in his State of the County address this year as related to economic development.
Yeah, we made mention of that in the first segment, Brian. It's obviously an experimental program, but I kind of doubt, I'm not challenging it, but I hope that's not the only economic development initiative that he's proposing.
I hope so too, but it was the only one he mentioned in his address. So, I mean, he talked about pie-in-the-sky stuff about a Green New Deal, green economy, all these jobs, but there was no specific details in there. The only specific thing he pointed out was this. And to me, it just seems, I was startled that was the only, with all the implications of what's going on with Tech City. You see the Hudson Valley Mall, what's happening out there. You see what's our diminishing population overall, particularly in this region of the county. It's just astounding to me that that was the only specific proposal that he had in his State of the County address. He may have things coming down the line. I pray that he does. I really do.
Brian, I was surprised. I guess nothing should surprise me anymore. But you mentioned it's about a month ago now, of the county losing population. First time in my lifetime that this county has lost population. and a fairly significant number. 3,000 people is almost the size of the village of Saugerties. Just kind of wiped Saugerties off the map. And you're the first person, official, ex-official in this case, that has even made mention of it. There was a time when these census figures were big news, one way or the other. And if one town lost or a community lost people, they would be up in arms about that. They would accuse the census takers of not counting people, of not doing their job, and other kinds of chicanery. And now it's just dead silence. I mean, this, as you point out, this is a bad thing for a community. Although maybe in some communities they'd rather have fewer people, but traditionally a growing, healthy, thriving community attracted people, didn't lose them.
Right, and you know what? Right for this was on the wall a couple of years ago. I actually spoke to it a couple times when I was in the legislature. The handwriting was on the wall that we were going to be losing population once the census returns were completed, because the tracking census data showed that. And my thing is, as well, we're an area that's heavily reliant upon grants for a lot of what we get done around here. And a diminishing population sure doesn't help in that regard.
Yeah, because grants are based in large part on the population and income.
Yep.
Hey, while we got you on the phone, we're talking about the legislature. Mm-hmm. You're a former legislator, Brian. Yep. Can you speak to your? Do you have any intentions of running for your old seat again?
I have no immediate plans as of now. It's still, I view it as still a little bit early, and to make a decision.
Well, it's getting late with the political calendar. I believe the Democrats nominated people last night.
I haven't decided yet.
Okay.
I will say, well, what you're talking about when you're speaking about the remake of the legislature, one of the things I think needs to be really, particularly for the people who live here in the city of Kingston. The city of Kingston, in my view, is even though we were represented proportionally as far as population, but as the amount of responsibility the city of Kingston takes as being the county seat, and the amount of county properties within the city that are off the tax rolls, and the services that the city still needs to provide. One of the things I'm very concerned about in the makeup of the legislature, it was already difficult enough. Sometimes when it was a city issue, like for instance when we got the county to stop charging the city of Kingston, the only town or city or township in the county, a charge for 911 services every year. I was able to push that through and get that changed. But when the time came for that, at first it felt like there was 3 legislators against the other 20. And what I'm concerned is if in reapportionment of the legislature, if the city were to lose another legislator, then the numbers get even more difficult. And there's not a lot of incentive, even within the caucus, whichever caucus you happen to be in, there's not a lot of incentive by the other caucus members to really help or do much for the city of Kingston. And I'm very concerned that the city of Kingston proportionally could be underrepresented in a new makeup of the legislature.
Interesting. I'm a city resident, so I'm concerned too.
Well, you think about it. It's something when I was in, there were three of us from the city and 20 from outside the city who really didn't give a damn, so to speak. You know what I mean? If it wasn't really something, it wasn't a bridge in their district that we were voting on. By the way, I used to point that out all the time, how we vote for bridges and roadways and all other far-flung areas of the county, and and none of that occurs within the city for the most part. We did get the trail put in, and they're going to, I guess, resume construction on that this spring.
You were a voice in the wilderness, Brian.
All right. Well, we'll see.
Well,
Anyway,
hold on.
I'm just going to get out and try to play some golf soon again, hopefully.
Yeah, you shot 67 at 12 skill.
69.
That's terrific.
That was actually that was my best ever, my personal best.
Yeah, I mean, I was a member there for about 10 years, and every time I went there, I dreamed of shooting 69.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, I got to run, so have a wonderful.
All right. Thanks for calling in, Brian. Good luck.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Catalano, just to revisit the statistics for a moment, and as it pertains to reapportionment, one of the things I find difficult to understand is there are roughly 120,000 enrolled voters, registered voters, in the county. Democrats have about 51,000. Republicans 28,000, and independents about 35, and then there's a smattering of minor parties. So Democrats have they're approaching a 2-to-1 majority in their enrollment over Republicans, and yet the county legislature in the last 10 years now, since it's been reapportioned by this independent commission, is consistently 1 or 2 difference. So, and I know Democrats talk about this. They're hell-bent to take every seat in the county, and they may well take it, but they look at the legislature and they go, it doesn't make statistical sense that this legislature is 12, 11 Democrat. It should be like 14 or 15 to 8. How do we explain that?
So the way I explain it is the fact that first off, there are still a number of so essentially what's going on here is a lot of the Democratic votes are very concentrated. Okay, so in the city of Kingston, you might have 8-to-1. Okay, so what happens is those 3 people get elected uncontested, virtually uncontested, by huge majorities, but they use up a lot of their plurality in the city of Kingston, the town of Woodstock, and the village of New Paltz, and the town of New Paltz.
And Rosendale.
Yeah. So those towns and the city eat a lot of the plurality. So, like New Paltz, for instance, is probably 15-to-1. Okay, but you still only get to elect 1 legislator. If we had at-large races in the county, then the Republicans wouldn't even have a seat. So now you get to the other contested areas, and let's take Saugerties, for instance, which is maybe slightly Republican. Whoever runs the better candidates in that community, the better known, the candidates who run a better campaign are going to win. So you had Democrats, you had Republicans, they flip back and forth. Okay, same thing like with the town of Ulster, which is slightly maybe Republican or might even be slightly Democrat now. You had Jim Maloney for a while. Nobody could beat him. Mm-hmm. He was well known, and now you got Brian Cahill, probably will get reelected unless the Republicans put up a strong candidate, and then there could be a heavily contested election. And if you go down and you look at the contested races, I remember when I was chairman, I think there were 5 contested races. I ignored the seats that were completely Democratic. I ignored the seats, or I tried to ignore the seats that were almost guaranteed Republican, and we put all our resources into. It's kind of like the national election.
Yeah.
Into the contested races, and those towns are the ones that decide the races. And so you might win 3, you might lose 2, you might win 2, you might lose 3, and that's it. and the chances of one party taking all 5 of those contested seats is minimal, and that's why you have a close legislature. And to be honest with you, to the credit of the Reapportionment Commission, I think it provides for better government, and I think you would probably agree. I think most people would agree with that. I'd like to comment just a bit on what Brian was saying about the lack of support for the city of Kingston. The biggest problem with the legislators from outside the city of Kingston is the fact that the city of Kingston gets 11.5% of the county sales tax. And you can't cry poverty when the majority of your budget comes from the county government, or at least the majority of your revenue, number one. And number two is the towns, they get 2%, 3%, whatever. And these folks have to go back to their towns that, they represent and explain how they're voting in favor of giving the city of Kingston more money or more benefit, when in fact it's a real bone of contention. I know this because I represented 3 of those towns when I was on the legislature, and it was always a bone of contention with the town supervisors that they weren't getting their fair share of the county sales tax, and they had revenue needs, and they provide services, and et cetera, and so that's it's kind of like some give and take here. It's a trade-off. You've got a lot of the county office buildings and things of that nature, but you also are provided with a lot of sales tax revenue to offset the costs associated, or the lost property taxes that accompany those. And so, but I give Brian a lot of credit because he really fought for the city of Kingston. But again, a quality legislator unable to get reelected in the city of Kingston because he's a Republican. And, those folks didn't appreciate his talent and didn't appreciate his representation. When you have like an 8-to-1 plurality,
Mario, it's not 8-to-1, buddy. It's not close to that. I'll give you 3-to-1. I'll give you 4-to-1. 8-to-1 is insane.
Yeah,
it's not
silly.
that bad. It's overwhelming, but it's not that bad.
Yeah. Okay.
Now I lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
Well, you're an old man, and
I know that.
You forget stuff.
Sad.
Yeah. I know. And
Wait, aren't you younger than him? Or you guys?
Yes, I am.
You are younger than him.
By 9 days. Yes. You're the old man.
Yep. I led the pack. I
Yeah.
was born 9 days before he. Anyway, so a couple of things that I was also wondering about, and that was we have finally heard from our congressman. And
what's his name again? What's his name again?
I'm not sure, but I think it's Delgado.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, Delgado. Yeah. I mean, and talk about kicking a guy when he's down. All of a sudden, this guy comes out of the woodwork to demand an investigation of the nursing home deaths. I mean, people were dying left and right. I don't know if you remember, but Tenbrook Commons was, that was almost like a death sentence, getting shipped off.
Hey, Kat, hold on a second. Let's get back to Delgado for. You and I talked about this last night again. I'm just speculating here, kind of blue skying, but the governor issues, or through his, and we've already covered this part of it, through Zucker, the governor issues an order moving people out of hospitals with the virus into nursing homes. And then he rescinds, I think that's March 15th, and then he rescinds that order, or Zucker does. The question in my mind is whether this order that he issued in March of last year was just for the city of New York, but he's governor of the whole state. And if he's governor of the whole state, with concerns for all his constituents on this particular issue, does that order pertain to the rest of the state and therefore Ulster County? Which the question is, were people moved out of our hospitals, people with COVID moved out of our hospitals into nursing homes? And I think that's a question that somebody should be raising and exploring. If it was not the case, good, because it was a really bad decision. But if it was the case, I think some people have some answering to do about it.
Oh yeah, no question.
Because as you said, I think it was Tenbrook Commons. People were dying almost every day out there. It was a.
And so. And by the way, I'm supporting Delgado in his request for an investigation. What I'm not supporting is the fact that he was not forthcoming when these people were dying to get an investigation. He wouldn't say a word until it's gang up time on Governor Cuomo. I mean, everybody's beating the hell out of Cuomo now. And so, where's the backbone here? It's almost like, hey, let's join this parade. It sounds like it's going in the right direction. And, I can embellish my, my bipartisan credentials by criticizing a Democrat who's on life support.
That's a good line. I don't know about him being on life support, which raises the question of is this a death knell for Cuomo? I don't think so, but it could be.
Nope. You know what? I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you. Now, by the way, there are plenty of Democrats. Did you hear the mayor on TV yesterday? The mayor of the city, New York, Bill de Blasio.
Yeah.
Oh my God! I mean, he was ready. He was ready to hang Cuomo or send him to guillotine. Of course, they have been frenemies forever, and so again, I think that. What's interesting is, and then how about the assemblyman from Queens,
Kim,
Mr. Kim, who got, who was threatened. That shouldn't be a surprise.
Well, yeah, this governor's reputation precedes him, which makes that allegation, which Cuomo denies, making that phone call and threatening him, what I will destroy you, more believable. Okay, we got a phone call coming in.
Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Hi, good morning. I'm
morning.
not sure about this, but I heard that there's a class action suit against Tenbrook Commons regarding all those deaths.
I had not heard that, madam. I understand that part of the governor's order was to create protect the nursing homes from liability. I think that's part of the conversation. If there is a class action suit, there should be a class action suit, I should say, but that's been one of the criticisms of this whole process, that people go in on behalf of their loved ones and try to get some compensation, and the state has already moved against it. Had you heard that? Do you know anybody who's joined that action?
I just really heard that there was a class action suit, and the family members of the people who died during that time were asked if they wanted to get on board. That's all I really know, and I wondered if you knew more. The thing of it was that the family members, of course, during COVID, were not allowed in to visit their people, and then all of a sudden, some got a call. Well, they're deceased now, and they were not able to be there to see how their family member was progressing in care and health or whatever. So that was the reason that I understood while somebody started this class action suit against Tenbrook Commons.
I would think the action would be more around the governor's or the health department's order placing people in those homes and placing them in jeopardy. That I would think would be the liability. I mean, it's a tragic thing not to be able to visit your loved ones, but I think not necessarily unnecessary. I would hesitate to. I'd hesitate to go to the hospital. To a hospital.
I don't want anywhere near there.
Yeah, exactly. So in a sense, that ruling protected the public, although it's a sad situation. But the other one was quite deliberate, and put people's lives in quite the opposite. Put people's lives in jeopardy, and that may be actionable. Catalano, you used to be a lawyer. What do you think about this?
Well, here's what I do know.
Thank you for that call, madam.
There's a local law firm who is soliciting potential clients. They have a piece on Facebook, on their Facebook page, asking for anyone who lost a loved one to COVID in a nursing home to contact them. So I think the young lady who called in may be onto something. I don't have any specific information about what their plan is with this information, if they're going to do individual cases or not. I think what's going on here is, I think the legislature is getting so much heat right now about these folks who perished in the nursing homes, that they're considering a retroactive law that removes some of the protections that Cuomo gave the nursing homes. And, typically in New York State, I hate to say this and I apologize profusely to all my friends in the legal profession, but New York State is actually controlled by the trial lawyers. And this is a monster payday that I do not think that they're willing to walk away from. And to a certain extent, the people whose families perished should be entitled to some compensation for this ridiculous law that was, or it wasn't even a law, it was a regulation that Cuomo issued because he couldn't get the nursing homes to take these people back. The nursing home operators to a certain extent, were aware of the fact, wait a second, you're sending sick people back. We don't have the staff. We got staff that's out with COVID. We can't handle this. And he's like, listen, you've got to take them back, and I'm going to exonerate you from any liability. At which point, the nursing homes took the people back. And what happened next was, rampant infection throughout the place. And, the results speak for themselves. And then they started fudging the numbers. Now, you got to remember, a lot of this, and I think this is where Cuomo was going to get into trouble, a lot of these decisions were not medical. They were political. The federal government set up 2 hospitals, one at the Javits Center, and they sent a hospital ship to New York Harbor. These people could have been sent to those facilities and put into isolation, but they did not. For whatever the reason, they chose not to give the federal government, I think it might have been a Trump thing, I don't know.
You think it might have been a Trump thing, huh?
You know what I'm saying? I can't speak to their motivation, but how insane is it that you had a hospital ship sitting in New York Harbor empty?
Empty, yeah.
When you had nursing homes backed up and I have to say this by way of full disclosure. One of my children owns an awning company in New York City, and he was called upon to erect canvas barriers around the hospitals and nursing homes so that they could hide the dead bodies from the public.
Wow.
So I know firsthand that they didn't even have a place to put most of these folks, and they were putting them. They got freezer trucks from Walmart that donated them, and they were putting the corpses until they could arrange for burials and things of that nature. They were dying so fast that even the undertakers couldn't keep up with the workload. They wanted to hide what was going on from the public. So this is not cool, and somebody needs to answer for this. I'm sorry. Like I said, I lost an aunt, I lost an uncle, and somebody needs to answer for this tragic mistake. Any place else, this governor would probably resign by now. In New York State, this is what we call rough and tumble, bare-knuckle politics here. And essentially, either he's going to have to get voted out. By the way, I'll mention this now. And what is this, February 19th?
19th, yeah.
Okay. You heard it on KCR, folks. I'm going to make a prediction on KCR. If Cuomo stays, he is going to get primaried by Letitia James as sure as I have gray hair. Okay? He's going to get primaried. He is going to get primaried, and he will not survive the primary. Letitia James is going to be the next governor of New York State. I will predict.
Save that tape.
On KCR. And this is why your subscription to this program is so important, because you get news here before anybody else.
Okay, Kat, you're out there on the limb. I think I predicted that in my column a couple of weeks ago, but here it is.
If he leaves, yeah, but it wasn't on the air, Hugh. It was in your column.
Okay.
Okay. Now we put it out. We put it out
across the whole world.
Country.
Yeah.
We streamed this. We have streamed this across the country. Now, by the way, if he resigns, which in a million years I can't see this egomaniac resigning.
Yeah.
But if he resigns, Kathy Hochul becomes the lieutenant governor. The lieutenant governor becomes the governor. She has 0% chance running for re-election. In a million years, she doesn't check off one box. Okay? She doesn't check off one box. She's not progressive enough. She's from upstate. No boxes. Nothing. So she would probably not run for re-election because she would realize that she'd get blown out. And in that case, Letitia James will still be your next governor.
I would suggest this, Kat, not to, because you're the expert here, but Letitia James herself was in a three-way primary for the office she holds, and I believe she got 37 or 38% of the vote and got elected state attorney general. I would safely predict that Letitia James will not be the only candidate against Cuomo. And if he can split the vote, split the opposition, he can get reelected because he'll have $25 million to spend on his campaign. And those TV ads, he will be the best governor you ever saw for the last 12 years. That's my prediction.
I think that's an interesting perspective. Remember, he barely beat Zephyr Teachout. He lost Ulster County to Zephyr Teachout, and she was completely underfunded. He outspent her like 20-1 and barely beat her in a primary. The thing about New York State is it's so lopsided Democrat that the only way for a Democrat to get ahead is the primary. And I just don't see what I would see is if she announces that there'll be a major primary for her job. But I think she's going to be strong enough that it will be her going up against Cuomo, and I'm not even sure he's going to run if he could get a cabinet appointment, which I don't think he can at this point. He's so damaged that even
Delgado's coming out against him. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be crazy to appoint this guy to anything. He has no private sector experience that I can think of. I have no idea what he would do, but in any event, I don't think he'll resign. If he resigns, it would be an admission that he did something wrong, which he clearly, people criticize Trump and he was this, he was that. Cuomo's no different. I mean, these two guys could be blood brothers for crying out loud. And they're just in different parties, that's all. But the truth is, my prediction is he will not resign. However, he will get primaried. And he will lose the primary. And I think Letitia will be our next governor.
Okay, we're going to hold you to that.
You can take that to the bank, buddy.
That's why I never make predictions. I rarely made predictions in my columns because if I was right, nobody gave me credit because it was probably very obvious. And if I was wrong, I never heard the end of it. So it just wasn't. Yeah. And particularly with the candidates, like Catalano's running against Reynolds for county legislature. Yeah. And I write that I think Reynolds is a pretty good candidate. I think he might win. Catalano gets furious because I'm taking sides. So
yeah.
You know how it is, but anyway, that's how it goes.
But when it comes to our governor, though, he's actually more like a dictator. He's been too wrong for too long, and it's time for a change.
Yeah.
His father was a bozo too.
His father couldn't make it to a fourth.
At least his father had a sense of humor.
He did, and I actually met him when I was 5 years old. He came to the radio station. I have a picture of it in the other room. I'm like grabbing and holding on to my dad's leg. It's probably like a Saturday. I'm like, Dad, I want to go home. And Mario's in the lobby having a conversation with my father. And, my father was a Republican. So, but he used to be on the radio. When our morning show was, what was it? It was it 3 hours back then? We used to have, like when Jody McTague and
Speaking of Jody, Jody just died.
Show. I think it started at 6 in the morning, and it went till 10. Or maybe it was 7 to 10. I remember because my first job at the radio station was screening the calls. People like Barbara Patrick used to call up and just go nuts. You remember her, right?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, I learned how to deal with Barbara. She often had something to say, but she'd say it forever. And I would say to her, Barbara, it's 10 o'clock. You've got 15 minutes. I'm hanging up at 10:15, regardless of where we are. But, no, go ahead. And at 10:15, I'd hang up. She never got mad at me. Yeah, she was.
I had an interesting scenario with Cuomo because I was appointed to the in the 90s. Maybe it was I think it was 1990, 91 maybe. There was a commission that he formed to study HIV and the healthcare practitioner. There were a lot of people in the country that wanted all healthcare practitioners tested for HIV after their dentist in Florida intentionally gave HIV to 5 patients. And so Cuomo set up this commission, whatever, and I was invited to a meeting at the executive office in Albany. I actually didn't know, even though I had been in the running PAC up there and everything else, we never got to do much with the governor, and I had to go to his executive suites, and I didn't know where I was going, so I left and I got there early. I got there about an hour early because I was just afraid I was going to be late and miss the meeting. Well, unbeknownst to me, there was another meeting going on before our meeting, and it had to do with the realtors in New York City. There was some issue about rent-controlled apartments and things of that nature. So I get there, and nobody asks me who I am. They just said, "Oh, are you here for the meeting?" And I said, "Yes." "Oh, come on, just go right in." So I walk in, and I sit down. No one in the room, and it was a huge table, no one asks me who I am. So I just sit down, and they're talking about real estate, and I'm like, what the hell? But I was too embarrassed to say anything. Like, hey, guys, listen, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm here for an HIV meeting. So I shut up, and I just listened, Well, now they decide to take a vote. and so, I voted. But the thing that impressed me the most about Cuomo was these were real political operatives in the room. And one of them said something to the effect, "Listen, these people give us a load of money. I think we should go this way." And to his credit, Mario Cuomo said, "That is not how I run this state. I don't care how much money they gave us. We're going to do the right thing." And boy, that really impressed me. I was like shocked because I had been dealing with legislative leaders that, would essentially sell their soul for, the kind of campaign contributions we were giving them. And this guy was like a stand-up guy. No, we're not doing that because of anybody's contributions. And I was completely impressed. Then it got embarrassing because everybody left the room and I didn't. And they're like, oh, and why are you staying? I said, "I'm here for the HIV meeting." And they cracked up. Cuomo was laughing his butt off because I sat through this real estate meeting and, then we sat down and we came up with a proposal that was satisfactory to the governor on how we were going to deal with the HIV situation. But it was funny, and the chairman of our committee was Margaret Hamburg, who is, I think, under Obama, she might have been the HHS secretary or somebody. Really, she really went places. A young doctor with great reputation, and but yeah, that was my claim to fame. That's as close as I got to Cuomo. One other thing. I tell you, it's a funny story, but when I was the chairman of the PAC, I had just taken over, and we were trying to make a name for ourselves. We had been underperforming. This is the dental PAC. We've been underperforming for years, and the governor was having a fundraiser. Mario Cuomo was having a fundraiser in New York City, and the tickets were $1,000 a ticket. And these were back in the day when $1,000 was some serious money. It was 1978, I think, or somewhere back there. So it may have been 77. I can't remember. But anyway, so we buy a table for $10,000, which was serious dough, and with one proviso. We wanted a table in front of the podium. So they said, if you'll buy a whole table, because at that point, lobbyists were buying 2 tickets, 3 tickets. We bought a table of 10. So now my lobbyist says to me, well, no, we need to invite some people to this thing. So I said, well, who are we going to invite? He says, well, why don't you call your Assemblyman, Henchy? I mean, you're friends with him. See if he wants to go. He's a Democrat. He'll support it, and we'll take him with us. So I called Maurice, and Maurice says, yeah, sure, I'll go to the fundraiser. And I said, make sure, you're dressed appropriately, because we're going to be right in front of the governor. He really, oh, yeah, we got the table right in the middle of the room. So we're calling around. Nobody wants to go to this damn thing. So it's the 3 of us, the lobbyist, Maurice Hinchy, and me. And we go down there, and the 3 of us are sitting right in the front of the room, table for 10, and we have 7 empty chairs.
Mario, you got to cut this.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Mario, but it's 9:02. We're only paid through to 9.
Sorry. Okay. Anyway, the long and the short of it was we made a name for ourselves, because what we told people was the reason we didn't invite anybody else was we want an unobstructed view of the governor. Hinchy was cracking up. We had a time of our lives, and that was it. Anyway, end of Mario Cuomo stories.
See you in 2 weeks.
All right, Mario. Have a good weekend. Stay nice and warm in Florida. Right. We'll see everybody on Monday.
Okay, good show. Bye-bye.
Thank you for sharing the morning with us and participating in Kingston Community Radio, KCR.